Photography Daily.
I want to find something nobody's ever seen before. That's kind of what many people strive for, and that's what I'm in search of, is the never-seen shots.
Photojournalist Ryan Visions is a man on a mission in a van in America, but as you'll find out, it's a mission he thinks we all share in many respects.
I believe that it may be being on the road, but I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I think I have a passion, as most photographers, for exploring and finding new environments.
So, van life. It's an episode that's been long coming, this one. The open road, the wind in our hair. Not so easy for me to say. The freedom to make a picture when you want, where you want, of what you want. It sounds perfect. Well, doesn't it?
I learned the hard way about buying an old van and romanticizing driving around in an old van. I was rear-ended outside Los Angeles last year, and since my van was 30 years old, they totaled it out.
For those who follow the Friday Photo Walk, you'll be aware that I have this friendship with Car, responsible for getting me to some of these wonderful locations we walk. Seems I'm not alone in my daftness.
I think it's important that I have a relationship with my van because it's not only a mode of transportation, but it's also my home, it's my shelter. So this van is a big silver van. It looks more like a really big SUV, and its name is...
And you'll have to wait to find out what Van Mark II is called. Look, let's be honest. Van life is not for everyone, and for nearly everyone, it's perhaps not possible, but I'd like you to live it for the next 40 minutes or so through my guest.
Every day is a Saturday and a Monday at the same time, because there's never a day where you get to just, at least in my experience, where I just get to sit still.
We talk about the reality of being on the road.
When humans sleep in a new environment for the first time, we sleep with half of our brain resting at a time as a survival mode. And so when you sleep in a van, at least in my case, I'm consistently moving. No 2 nights, generally, I'm in the same place. I'm always in a new place every night because I'm photographing. And so my brain is always in survival mode, I guess.
Being on the road, being with a camera, an experience that has some positive health benefits for Ryan.
I had to clear myself out of some personal demons and mental issues that I was having from traumas and things like that. And photography is a healing space for me.
We tackle social media.
Social media is used, and I recognize it in myself, for self-vanity, where you want people to tell you you're doing a great job, or your photo is amazing, or this or that, right? It feeds our, I don't want to say ego, but we get caught up in this world where we're almost like competing with each other on social media for attention.
And we find out about the wonderful nature of traveling with a special companion.
I tell people, I'm making a photography book, but really it's just an excuse to give my dog the best life I can. and he's my ride or die.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today that photographer is Ryan Visions.
I mean, I have the best job in the world, Neil. I get to share my memories and share what I see with the world and how I see it. To me, there's nothing better than that.
Patron of the day today is Anna McCarthy. I'll leave a link to her work, as always, in the famous show notes, which I do hope you're being sure to visit. A former BBC editor, I can vouch for the corporation, or Auntie as it's affectionately known, as being a reasonably good place to find your creative spirit. Though if you look at Anna's work, you'll see plenty of experience and natural craft of knowing photographically how to be in the right place at the right time. And that's not something you learn, that's something that's instinctive. And you'll see this particularly within her Insta feed, which shows a lot of Anna's reportage at weddings. Patrons keep this show on the road, so to speak, today. They're the reason I can do what we do, although we're at the start of this journey with so much more to come. So by joining up, you'll be a part of how we move forward together in the future. And I'll tell you more about that soon. Here's a question. Is there a piece of camera kit in a cupboard, in one of those camera bags you've not looked in for a while, or tucked away in a drawer? A lens, a flash, a camera that you just haven't used lately? For some reason you're holding on to it, but you don't know why. Or you've forgotten you even had it. That's the way I usually work. Well, now is the time to turn that old kit into cash. If you're in the US, Europe or the UK and you can spare just a few moments, because that's all it takes, go to mpb.com and sell it using the simple process on their front page. You'll end up with cash that you can either pocket or, of course, trade on the site for kit that you'd rather have instead. mpb.com. Right. van life. Now, I've been meaning to do something about this for so long now, and probably because it was introduced as a concept photographically by today's guest, just in conversation, not with a view to do an interview. The last time Ryan Visions was on this show, we were talking about his photojournalism and his own personal, very fraught at times journey, added to the fact that one of his pictures had managed to earn him a place apparently on an FBI watch list. Packing everything you own into something the size of a, well, van is no small feat for a photographer who freely admits to being in love with kit. I have a very romantic notion about being on the road and van life, this idea about being a photographer, creating from a different location every day. And so this is a story today where even if I can't live it myself right now, I can at least help us understand together what it means to travel where your heart takes you. If you can afford the diesel, that is. Photographic van life with my guest, Ryan Visions. Ryan, we talked last year about how your journey into photojournalism started in 2010. Your father had taken his life the year prior, and you'd taken yourself on a journey across the world where you ended up in Bangkok in the centre of a protest, and that's where it all started, really, photographically for you. And today we're talking about being on the road once more. Is that, as a photographer, where you're frankly happiest on the road? It seems to me like you are.
Yeah, I believe that it may be being on the road, but I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I think I have a passion, as most photographers, for exploring and finding new environments. And that's really what I'm searching for. I think with this project, I want to find something nobody's ever seen before. That's kind of what many people strive for. And that's what I'm in search of, is the never seen shots.
So what is the project then? I mean, is it landscape? Is it fine art? Is it photojournalism? Because there are moments that are.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first had the concept of living in a van with my dog and traveling the United States, documenting all 50 states, I had this grandeur idea of photographing what the country is and who we are as a nation and the communities that make up this nation. And so the original concept for this book I'm making was people and like who we are.
Yeah.
Well, when I got on the road, I realized I was on the road during a pandemic in a very polarized country due to politics. And I kept finding myself being pushed or gravitating towards rather nature. And so over the course, it's been some humanist photography, some photojournalism. For instance, I photographed a inauguration in DC, and I photographed a few different humanist pieces, but a lot of it has been focused on the landscape and nature and wildlife. And for me, I tried to tie that all together because the climate and the environment is really important to me. And so it's an ever evolving project, I guess.
Well, when we first talked, you were just building the van. You were just converting it, whatever you needed to do. I think there's been 2 vans, isn't there?
There has been 2 vans. I am now in my second van.
Mark II,
completely different van. It's newer. I learned the hard way about buying an old van and romanticizing driving around in an old van. I was rear-ended outside Los Angeles last year. And since my van was 30 years old, they totaled it out. And so I was stuck in a hotel in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and all my belongings were in a trashed van in a junkyard. And I had to make the decision of whether or not I wanted to go home with my tail between my legs, or if I wanted to take out a lease on a new vehicle and continue going. And I decided that I knew if I went home, I would probably never do this again. So I bought another van, chopped a huge hole in the roof for a fan, rebuilt it out in the snow during the winter in Flagstaff, Arizona for a month, and got back on the road. So this is van 2.
And van 1 is well and truly gone now.
It is dead. Yeah, her name was Wanda, and she was a 1988 Vandura that I spent about 6 months building out and customizing and putting all my blood, sweat, and tears into it. And she was destroyed within 3 months.
Have you renamed have you named the new van?
I have. I think it's important that I have a relationship with my van because it's not only a mode of transportation, but it's also my home. It's my shelter. So this van is a big silver van. It looks more like a really big SUV, and its name is Apollo. And Apollo, because we're out discovering and exploring and she's a strong beast.
I mean, it's not just for the young uns, he says, sounding very ancient, this life, is it? I mean, there's a few more mature vanners out there. I was reading one of your posts. After waking up to a remarkably warm sun, I hung around the harbour for a couple of hours, drinking coffee and chatting with an older van lifer from Kentucky who'd been on the road for 3 years. We talked about politics, did a little debating, but mostly spoke about our experiences. What's the community like generally? Do you look out for each other?
So I think my experience with van life is a little bit different than everybody else's. Right. And what I mean by that is van life is a culture, it's a community, but I see myself more as a photographer that happens to just live in a van, because I'm always on the move. A lot of the van life community, people will meet in spots, or they'll stay still for a week or 2 weeks and enjoy the nature. For me, it's just consistently moving. So my perspective on van life in the community is different than probably other people. Not everybody, but I have a different kind of view on it. But what I do know is that there is a great feeling of joy when you see somebody on the road that is really living that lifestyle, and it's not just a weekend. You could tell a difference between a weekend van and somebody who's really doing it. And nothing against weekenders, but I think there's a bond between people that live life full time, because you have a greater understanding of what actually goes into it. And people do look out for each other. I've made some really great friends along the way.
When I saw it, you described van life is both a Monday and a Saturday, all at the same time. Because forgetting the logistics of how you pay for life at the moment, which we'll get onto if you don't mind, there are some, myself included, who may wrongly look at this as one long holiday.
I had that perception when I was building the van. I think, first off, it's a amazing life. It's a completely unique experience if you've never done it before, and so I don't want to make it sound like it's not something that it's not. It's the ultimate freedom in a sense. But I think social media and the internet romanticizes it to the point, because there's a lot of money in pushing lifestyles and pushing cultures. Every day is a Saturday and a Monday at the same time, because there's never a day where you get to just, at least in my experience, where I just get to sit still. There's always cleaning. There's always things that need to be done. There's always getting on the road and moving. There's never sitting still. It can be conceived as or perceived as a vacation, but even being on vacation forever, the tarnish wears off and you have to handle your daily life, right? And everything becomes more complicated when you're on the road. For instance, trying to get packages of supplies that you may need, or where are you going to take a shower, or where are you going to use the restroom, or where are you going to sleep. The challenges in life are there, but they're completely different than what you have when you're in a homestead. And so you're consistently having to adapt to your environment. I recently learned that when humans sleep in a new environment for the first time, we sleep with half of our brain resting at a time as a survival mode. And so when you sleep in a van, at least in my case, I'm consistently moving. No 2 nights, generally, I'm in the same place. I'm always in a new place every night, because I'm photographing. And so I'm trying to move and get as many photos as I can. And so my brain is always in survival mode, I guess, right? And so that's a toll that it puts on you too. It's not this romanticized version where it's just carefree. There's a lot of things that go into it mentally, emotionally, physically, and work wise to make it possible. So it's a Saturday and a Monday all at once.
Well, when we spoke originally, the idea was book. Just to come back to why you went on the road, is the book still the master plan? Or I know now you're producing prints and you have a Patreon, and people that belong to your Patreon, if they're on the right tier level, they get prints. But what's happened to the idea of the project? Has that been as fluid as the genre?
I'm still making a book. That is 100% the goal. When Standing Rock ended, when we spoke the first time, I had to clear myself out of some personal demons and mental issues that I was having from traumas and things like that. And photography is a healing space for me. And so my next project was, okay, what can I do that's not so traumatic that is still a challenge? And so the idea was, well, I'm going to document every state in the United States and make a book out of it. And that is still my ultimate goal. There's only a few photographers that have successfully done it. And in my eyes, that is the ultimate feat in American photography, is to create a book of the entire country, all 50 states. That is my end goal. Yes, there's other things that I have to do to financially keep myself on the road, including prints and Patreon and using the internet. But if it was possible for me, I would shut off my social media 100% and focus and not share any of my work and create a book of photographs that nobody has seen. It's just not financially possible because I have to. It's expensive to be on the road. But my ultimate goal is to create a book of all 50 states. And that's a really crazy idea, because if you think about it and you go, okay, what does a book of all 50 states look like?
Yeah.
Well, even if I take 10 photographs from all 50 states, that's 500 photographs. And that's only trying to pick an entire state within 10 photographs.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize it until I got on the road when I was heading to my gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Monroe Gallery. But I remember driving west and going, man, this is a really long drive. And then I remember thinking, there's north and there's still south. And it didn't dawn on me, Neil, until I got on the road, how big this country actually was and how I chewed off way more. Bit off way more than I could chew.
Ryan, I live in the UK, Ryan. I could have told you, I could have done the maths for you before you started. You live there. You know how big it is.
No, in all fairness, Neil, before I had this van, before I had my first van, I hadn't had a driver's license in 10 years.
Right.
So I flew places to cover stories and photograph, but I never drove the United States. And so, I mean, I knew it was big, right? But I didn't realize how big it was until you're driving across the middle of nowhere for 10 hours. And so, you're right, and I knew it was going to be big, but I just remember having that feeling when I was driving. I go, what have I got myself into? and I'm stubborn, so I'm not going to just give up.
No.
Right?
No.
So I said, okay, well, I'm going to stare the dragon in the face, and I guess this is my life now. And that's what I'm doing.
Well, what has it done for you creatively, Ryan? I mean, you're an established photographer now and an established photojournalist. And for fear of some people wondering if we may be hitting the woo-woo button, has it spiritually helped you? I mean, you said you were fighting some demons, and this has been a word I use often. This sounds to me like it's been a cathartic experience for a start.
It's hard to explain what happens to somebody when you are forced through your own choice. This is my own choice. But when you are forced to live a life of more solitude, when you pull yourself out of your comfort zone, you live by the seat of your pants, moment by moment, without a safety net. If something happens to me where I'm at right now, for instance, I don't have any close friends that are nearby that can be at my side if something happens. And so, being on the road, I've been on the road for 9 months now, maybe 10. A lot of it is being alone with my own thoughts, ultimately learning about myself and what I can handle. And I think that's really important. And it's also changed a lot of my outlook. I do a lot of introspective self-learning about myself and healing and looking at the world from a different view. What I mean by that is, I've pulled myself out of this world where I used to be super materialistic. I used to collect shoes and toys and this and that. And now I can't do that. I don't have the space. I don't have the money. And I've pulled myself out of who I was before, which I don't think there's anything wrong, but you take a different outlook. And I've been learning what's more important to me in this point of my journey. Being in nature, I think, is really healing for people. And I think that we forget that because we've been taught with social media or conditioned through social media that we have to consistently share information. Social media is used, and I recognize it in myself, for self-vanity, where you want people to tell you you're doing a great job or your photo is amazing or this or that, right? It feeds our, I don't want to say ego, but we get caught up in this world where we're almost like competing with each other on social media for attention. And nature doesn't care about any of that, And so I've been doing a lot of introspective learning and changing what matters to me. I've been learning to eat healthier because I've realized the processed food I've been putting in myself wasn't good for me. And then that concept of processed food started to move towards what processed people and processed media was.
I want to get back to isolation in a moment, actually, and talk about that. But you've mentioned social media a couple of times now, Ryan, and I remember when you were first setting the van up, I thought, well, okay, prepare myself then for Ryan's Van Life YouTube channel. But that would be the antithesis of what you really want.
It is. I feel, at least for me, that this is my life. Yeah. Now, like, this is my private life, this is my personal life, this is my business life, this is my work life, this is all my life. And for me, I don't feel that I can truly appreciate the journey that I'm on if I'm consistently trying to film it and show people and edit and create content that is appealing to people. And nothing against people that do that, but a big part of this journey was self-healing and finding who I am and also who I am as a photographer. And so for me, it's important to experience things that I don't take photos of too, and don't share with the world. And some things are just personal, you know?
Well, this time of isolation on the road has been compounded by a pandemic too, Ryan. The roads in this country, in the UK, were eerily quiet at times. I'm not sure what they were like for you, but I want to go a little deeper on the isolation of travel and how you've dealt with that in these times. Though you've had a travel buddy who does seem... Well, it's not so much to dictate your plans, but certainly I think figures in them.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that. So I do have my dog with me. His name is Freedom. Yep. He is a rescue dog that I rescued in Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria. He was super small. He was like 2 weeks old when I found him. And he's my best friend, and he's on this road trip with me. And a lot of my photography project has to be focused around him because I don't want to leave him anywhere, and he's my best friend. And I just can't, there's certain things I can't do. But as far as the isolation thing goes, I think generally I deal with it sometimes. I deal with that loneliness, but I also have a lot of previous experience in preparation for it. Before I got on the road, there was a lot of things that I had to decide about myself to prepare myself to do this because I knew it was going to be mentally straining. And I was dealing, like I mentioned before, with traumas. So, before the pandemic started, about 6 months before the pandemic started, I started going to trauma therapy and started getting sober. And so I quit drinking alcohol. I used to have a drug problem. And I got sober for about 6 months before even the pandemic started. But that journey into sobriety from alcohol and drug abuse, I didn't know how to deal with it. So I spent a lot of time at home, shied away from everybody I had known because it's so easy to access your old lifestyle if you're surrounded by the people that were always there with it. And for them, a lot of my friends, they can handle those issues, or they can handle going out and having a couple of drinks. For me, I was an alcoholic. And so I just had to completely pull myself away. So I had a lot of experience with isolation and being alone before the pandemic and before getting on the road through getting sober. And my dog was there the whole time. And so that was really important for me to bring him along because there was times where I wouldn't leave my house or leave my bed even for days at a time. And he would lay with me and be there through my hardest times. And so when I got on the road for the adventure of the lifetime, I said, I can't get rid of this guy. I want to give him the best life. And so, a lot of this, I tell people, I'm making a photography book, but really it's just an excuse to give my dog the best life I can. and he's my ride or die.
Now, usually we don't talk about the kit. We talk about the why over the how. It's a regular mantra of mine, but I can't not visit that place because you're in a van. You've already mooted that you have to be so careful what stuff you take with you. And I think just off air, before we started, you mentioned to me just to sometimes get to a fork means you have to turn the whole van over just to get to the right cupboard. What are you taking photographically? What are you using, and how much have you had to strip back? Because you do have your. I mean, I've seen you lay that table out. I saw a canyon behind you, and it looked just idyllic to me. You had the table laid out. You had your your laptop on the table. You were deving pictures digitally. I thought that looks amazing. But you've got to be careful how much you take with you.
Yes, you do. And I have a addiction to cameras. There's always something that I realize that I need. I've been debating this for a long time because I have things that I want to sell, but I also don't like selling stuff. I like giving stuff away. And so every camera I've ever had before, I've never sold. I've always gave them away to somebody who needed a camera. Just because I'm very fortunate as somebody who didn't come from a background of photography, didn't go to school, have never worked for a publication to make my passion my job. And I've always tried to pay that forward. So I photograph with two Sony A7R2s, which are 41 megapixel cameras.
Yeah.
And the reason I use both of those is because with that high megapixel, it allows me to not have to change the lenses so much if I need to crop in to get a photo. A lot of the places I spend time, there's dust or different elements. And with mirrorless cameras, your sensor is just out there. So if I can cut down having to change lenses, and then I shoot with a mirage of lenses for it. I have wide angle 24-70s, 70-200, 100 to 400. And then I have a couple other cameras that I use for specific things. For instance, I have a Fujifilm X100V, which is a smaller, it looks like an old 35 millimeter rangefinder.
I know it well, yeah.
I'll use that camera if I'm going into a place where it's a little less intrusive, where I'm not carrying around a huge Canon, not Canon camera, but like what looks like a huge rocket launcher. It's small, it's compact, it's not as intrusive on people. So if I'm going into a small shop or someplace where I don't want to make myself known that I'm a photographer, I'll bring that in. And then I also have a Fujifilm GFX 50R, which I haven't used it a whole lot, but I'll use that mostly for portraiture and things along those lines. So they all have their specific purposes, all four cameras for different situations. And then I have GoPros and a drone and all this other stuff I don't use. And that's why I'm like, why did I buy this stuff? Because I'm not making YouTube videos.
Is there any room left to sleep?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, that's just the cameras, Neil. I mean, then there's the lights and the tripods and,
absolutely.
all the other stuff.
Well, how do you squeeze it in? How do you squeeze it into the van? How does that work logistically?
So I built out the van, and I have this center console between my driver's seat and my passenger seat. It's actually a really large lockable box that came with the van, because this used to be a cargo van, my van.
Right.
And so it was made for work. And so it has this huge box in the middle of it that can lock. And that's usually where I store. I mean, if I opened it right now, there's 4 cameras in there, 3, 4, or 5 lenses. And that makes it really easily accessible for me when I'm driving. If I see something that I want, I just open up the box, pull out my camera, go photograph it, and then put my stuff back in the box. And then farther in the back underneath my bed, because I built my bed on a platform, I have storage and everything, but I have one area right next to my door, which it's all made out of maple wood. This door is a lockable door, and that's where I keep my Pelican case with my drone and all my extra lenses and all my camera equipment. And if I have to leave my van for an extended period of time, I can lock that.
Back with Ryan Visions in just a moment. In the last year, we've spoken with photo legends, talked about photographers' personal stories, heard about their journeys, shared what picture making means, made sure to talk about mental health and inclusivity during hundreds of hours of audio. And that bank of knowledge, that resource, will just keep building if you're able to support the show with a small donation per month, because that's what keeps this project afloat. Some of our patrons donate the cost of a coffee, some the coffee and cake per month, and others the cost of a couple of rolls of HP5, my favourite film stock. And because I value those that show their passion for this project, I've been writing and presenting now a regular Thursday members-only diary show and book club. And we meet together once a month for a Zoom photo challenge, which you're invited to, and I post films and pictures that have inspired me along the way. You can join our club and support the show by going to photographydaily.show and clicking the Patreon app. And once you've done that, it's easy to hear the additional stuff through your new app on your phone or on the desktop. But most importantly, you're supporting the creative world and the show and becoming part of our community. Tomorrow, by the way, you'll hear a little more of Ryan's story, in so much that we're going to talk about your most precious picture on the Patreon feed only. And he has a good story about just that from the last year. Plus, Book Club this week features the wonderful work of Vivian Maier. Right, back to Ryan Visions. Have you got a rhythm of how you organise your life? I mean, or do you simply throw caution to the wind, Ryan? And I suppose I'm asking you how fluid you are with your day-to-day planning. You've already suggested to me that you hadn't really thought extensively about it because you got on the road and thought, boy, this is a big place. But, I mean, is there we're going to go there next, there next, there next? I mean, there must be a plan.
There's a very, very loose plan. And the reason I don't have a big plan, when I first got on the road and I first hit the road, people that were watching what I was doing, I think were living vicariously through me, which I understand. And they kept suggesting places I should go and visit. And so I caught myself traveling around the country, going to this place and that place. And I realized a lot of the people that were suggesting places that I go were suggesting places that are amazing places, but aren't photographically interesting. And so I had to get ahead of myself and photograph from where I've already been and not listen to where people were suggesting I should go.
Yes.
Because I learned the hard way through lots of driving and a lot of gas that I need to just kind of follow my own path. As I've gone on, I've learned that there's certain things that I don't want to do. I don't want to spend all my time on the interstate. So I don't take interstate. I take country roads, back roads, because my view is that the interstates are the artery of the country. It gets you from point A to point B as quickly as possible. But the back roads, the country roads, the small communities, those are the nerve endings of this country. And that's what connect people. And I've learned that if you go down back roads and country roads, you'll find things that are amazing and beautiful that don't get recognized on tourist brochures. You meet locals who know local places that are amazing places to photograph that you won't hear about on, top 10 visit this place blogs. And a lot of it is just kind of going by the seat of my pants. Now, a lot of this journey is focused around weather per se. So I'm in the Pacific Northwest right now. I'm actually right on the Columbia River in Washington, and I'm looking across the river at Oregon. And where we're at right now it's in the mid 60s, but the rest of the country is in a heat wave.
Yeah.
And so I have my dog with me, and it's only getting hotter. And so I have to pay attention to where I go based on the weather. This winter, I spent my time down in New Mexico and Arizona because even though it got relatively cold there at certain times, there was no snow.
No.
The rest of the country had snow. And so a lot of this project has been about the environment. And I've also had to learn how to work with the environment to get what I want. But I don't have a set plan. I think if I had a set plan, when I first got on the road, I had this idea that I was going to photograph a month in this state, and then I was going to move a month to that state. And then I found out the hard way that a month is not enough time to photograph any state if I'm stressing myself out. And B, it takes all the fun out of the journey if I'm just consistently on a schedule. And so I really leave myself open with a loose idea of what I have to do, but I don't pick destinations. And that ties back to what I was saying earlier about trying to handle so many different aspects of what it's like to document being on the road. Because a lot of what I'm doing, there is no final destination. There is a lot of searching without knowing what you're looking for. And so that takes away the time of like being on the computer or editing photos. But at the same time, it opens up a world of discovery and opportunity that could be missed otherwise.
Look, gratuitous question, Ryan. You did touch on this, and I do want to come back to it. I spoke with Jason Florio, who's a fantastic photojournalist, just a couple of weeks ago on the show. A photojournalist who with his wife is based out of the Gambia. Now he's not he's not short of ideas, but he has to get very creative with funding for most, if not nearly all of them. How are you funding this?
So I'm very fortunate as a photographer to work for myself. I don't work for any organizations. I'm self-funded for the most part. Yes, I am self-funded. It all comes through my photography. And I have different outlets. For starters, my photography is represented by the Monroe Gallery of Photography in Santa Fe. I signed with them in 2017. And so they represent a lot of my photojournalism work. And so some of my funding comes through selling prints through the gallery. And then I have a Patreon, where if people want to sign up for as little as $5 a month, they can get access to photos that I don't share on social media, my personal journal about what I'm experiencing and how I'm feeling, because it's really important for me to write out what's happening to me. And so my funding comes from all different, as a photographer now, and I think with a lot of creative fields, the internet has done a lot of things, a lot of good things. And so we have to spread our wings out. And it's not important to rely on just any one source. And so, different tentacles out different ways, but a little bit adds up.
Look, this book, I've done a bit of calculations for you, because I'm worried, Ryan, that you don't do enough of them. And you did say to me just now, this is around about a year. Well, originally when we spoke, it was going to be about a year or maybe two. I'm thinking if you're a month in each state, and sometimes you're spending more time there, and I know logistically driving from one end of the country to the other to beat the weather also adds a month or three on here and there. I'm thinking this is about 5 years. And I just want to break that to you so that it doesn't become a horrible surprise further down the road.
Thank you.
The agenda to keep moving, to keep experiencing, has that transcended the original reason for making this journey to make a book over maybe a shorter period of time? I'm sort of sensing that you're happy to stay out there for a long time yet.
Oh man, yeah. This is my life. This is my life now. And I think, one day you wake up and it's just another Tuesday, right? Like the magic wears off in anything you do over time. I mean, it's still there, but it's the shock and awe of like waking up in the van and going, oh man, where am I? You wake up and you go, well, this is just another day. This is my life now. And I've experienced that before. I experienced that at Standing Rock when we were out there dealing with the pipeline and militarized police. I remember there was a point where you wake up and you go, well, time to make coffee. It's Tuesday, instead of what are we doing? This is crazy. And so this is my life, and I'm so thankful that I'm able to do it. And I can't express enough how I'm thankful and important it is for me to be able to. I mean, I have the best job in the world, Neil. I get to share my memories and share what I see with the world and how I see it. To me, there's nothing better than that, to just be able to share my experiences in a way that connects with people. And photography is therapy for me. And there's a never ending search for what's out here. I've thought about this a lot, and I've done the calculations too, where I go, well, if I photographed every state for 1 month, that's 4 years. And then obviously as a photographer, you generally progress in your art over time. So I'm really worried that in 4 or 5 years, when I've finished photographing every state, I've progressed at my craft. And then I look back at my photos from 5 years ago and go, oh, these are horrible. I got to go back and reshoot those. But I do plan on completing a book, but it's also important for me to make it the best I can. And I also have to remember to enjoy the ride too. And so, yeah, this is my life. This is how I live every day now. And I love it. I can't say anything other than that,
My sincere thanks to Ryan Visions. And that's it for today. Keep sending your questions, your feedback, your photo stories about anything that you do with photography to studio@photographydaily.show so that I can feature you in the mailbag edition, which is the Friday Photo Walk. On that note, remember you can also send in your pictures from your own photo walks to appear on the episode's show page online, with links, of course, to your website or Instagram. If you haven't yet, join our private Facebook group and follow us on Instagram. Links to all this and our guests and our wonderful supporters on Patreon. They'll be on the Photography Daily show page today, linked to in your podcast player app as always. Music on the show was from the incredible artslist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.